The Mongols were used to seeing the enemy flee even before the battle began. Genghis Khan's army destroyed states one after another. Cities surrendered without a fight, simply at the sound of the Mongols' approach. The commanders seemed invincible. The very name Mongol became synonymous with doom. But there were moments that the empire itself preferred not to remember. Once, Genghis Khan's best generals were surrounded by the same technique they had used to destroy others for years. Another time, an entire army was lured into a forest trap and almost completely slaughtered. Then, a huge fleet simply disappeared into the sea along with 100,000 soldiers. And the most amazing thing is that all these defeats happened exactly when the Mongols were confident that victory was already within their grasp. Today, we'll examine 4 defeats the Mongol Empire sought to erase from history. Countdown, from the 4th to the 1st. 4th place, Botogai Targun, Siberian tribes, 1219. Her name, Botogai Targun, translated as big and scary. Not a chieftain, not a military leader. A woman at the head of Siberian forest tribes, against an army that had just conquered half the known world. 1219. The Mongols had already subjugated vast territories. They were accustomed to warfare on the steppe, where their cavalry thrived. Speed, maneuverability, range. Everything worked, always. But in the northern forests, the usual tactics began to fail. The Mongol army moved through the dense forest along a narrow path, a long, stretched-out column. Horsemen who couldn't turn around. Cavalry who had lost their main advantage, space. Botogai Targun took advantage of this with surgical precision. First, her men blocked the Mongols' path back. Then they set up an ambush ahead. The column found itself trapped on both sides in a narrow corridor where it was impossible to turn around or use their bows to their full potential. The Mongol commander was killed. His unit was virtually annihilated. When Genghis Khan learned of what had happened, he was furious. According to legend, the Khan intended to personally lead an army against the Siberians to erase the shame. His confidants dissuaded him. Ultimately, the tribes were subdued, but in a different way, by diplomacy and pressure. Botogai Targun herself was married to the Mongol ambassador she had previously captured. It was not just a military failure. It was a lesson the Mongols hadn't expected. Forest warfare negated all their superiority. No speed, no maneuverability, no opportunity to encircle and shoot from a distance. The Mongols subsequently encountered similar difficulties during their campaigns in Eastern Europe. Forests were their enemy, one that could not be defeated by speed. 4th place. A woman named Big and Scary stopped an invincible army.
3rd place, Volga Bulgars, 1020-23. This defeat was particularly offensive because it happened right after the triumph. 1223. The armies of Jebei and Subutai had just routed the Russian princes and the Polovtsians at the Kalka River. A brilliant victory. Genghis Khan's finest generals at the peak of their powers. Behind them lay the annihilated armies. Ahead lay the return journey home through the lands of the Volga Bulgars. Jebei and Subutai were considered the best commanders of the era. They were the ones who developed the feint retreat tactic, which worked against everyone. Against everyone, except those who have studied it. The Bulgars knew perfectly well how the Mongols fought. They observed, they analyzed, and they decided to answer the Mongols with their own weapons. The Bulgar troops began gradually luring the Mongol vanguard forward, feigning a retreat. It was a classic Mongol ploy.
And Jebe and Subutai, the men who had devised this tactic themselves, fell into it. When the main forces were drawn into pursuit, the Bulgars attacked simultaneously from the front and rear. The Mongols found themselves surrounded. The Arab historian Ibn al-Athir wrote that only about 4,000 people managed to escape. The rest perished. For an army that had been setting similar traps against others for decades, this was a special kind of disaster. Not just a defeat from its own tactics. It was after this that the Mongols began to take reconnaissance much more seriously. Before Bulgaria, rapid raids often bred overconfidence.
Forward! Attack
Afterward,
now!
every
Show no
offensive was
mercy!
preceded by a thorough assessment of the terrain and the enemy's intentions. Subadai would lead many more brilliant campaigns, but the defeat at the hands of the Volga Bulgars would remain one of the most painful moments of his career. Third place. Genghis Khan's best generals were destroyed by their own weapons. Second place. Jalal ad-Din, Khwarizm, 1020–21. He was the son of the Khwarezm Shah, the heir to a ruined empire, a man with nothing left but an army and the will to fight. And it was he who inflicted one of the most painful defeats on Genghis Khan in open combat. 1221, Parwan Valley. 30,000 Mongol horsemen under the command of Shigi Kutuhu, an experienced commander, against the army of Jalal ad-Din. The Khwarezmians were roughly twice as numerous, but the main thing wasn't numbers. Jalal ad-Din understood the main weakness of Mongol tactics. They disliked protracted battles. Their entire system was designed for lightning speed: strike, retreat, lure, encircle, destroy. But if the enemy forced them into a difficult, slow fight, the system would fail. Jalal ad-Din did just that. The battle lasted 2 days. 2 days of grueling combat without a decisive outcome. The Mongols were unable to employ their usual tactics. The Khwarezmian cavalry did not pursue them during their retreat or break their formation. On the second day, Jalal ad-Din personally led the decisive attack. The Mongols were defeated. This was an extremely painful blow for Genghis Khan's army. Defeats in open battle were rare. Defeats at the hands of an organized and determined enemy were even rarer. This war turned out to be one of the bloodiest in the history of the Mongol conquests. Both sides stopped showing mercy to each other. Sources recount grisly details. In 1228, approximately 400 Mongol prisoners were tied to horses' tails and dragged through the streets of Isfahan after a battle. Other accounts say nails were driven into the prisoners' heads. The Mongols believed that's where a person's soul resided. The Khwarezmians decided to respond in kind. Jalal ad-Din himself continued to resist for several more years. Genghis Khan personally pursued him, but was never able to capture him. Second place. One commander, with the remnants of a shattered empire, gave Genghis Khan something he didn't expect: a real fight. First place, Japan, 1,1274 and 1,1281. 100,000 people disappeared overnight. 1,268. Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, ruler of the greatest empire in human history, decided to conquer Japan. A small island, not a great power, not a huge army, just islands that dared to refuse his submission. For the first invasion in 1274,
They assembled approximately 900 ships and 23,000 warriors. By the standards of naval expeditions of the time, a formidable force. The fleet set out to sea and got caught in a storm. The ships were falling apart. They had been hastily built from river timber, not designed for sea voyages. The losses were enormous. The expedition failed. Any other ruler would have stopped. Kublai began preparing a second invasion. This time, the scale was incomparable. Thousands of ships, about 60,000 sailors,
Roughly 100,000 soldiers, the largest sea expedition the Mongols ever undertook. The army landed on the Japanese islands. The Japanese defended themselves tenaciously. In the previous years, they had built coastal fortifications and studied Mongol tactics. A significant portion of Kublai's army remained on ships for months, cramped, hot, and sick. At night, Japanese boats launched swift attacks on the ships. Provisions were running low. And then, the typhoon came. The Japanese called it kamikaze, divine wind. Thousands of ships were wrecked on the rocks. Others simply capsized in the open sea. The shore was littered with debris and bodies. Contemporaries estimated that over 100,000 people perished in one night. Kublai never tried to conquer Japan again. This failure was one of the first signs that the Mongol Empire was losing its former strength. Enormous resources were wasted. The very idea of naval warfare proved alien to a power built on cavalry and the vastness of the steppe. The steppe empire tried to become maritime, and the sea destroyed it. First place, 100,000 people, one night. The end of the myth of invincibility.
4 defeats, 4 different lessons. A woman named Big and Scary showed that the forest is destroyed by speed. The Volga Bulgars showed that their own weapons can be turned against you. Jalal ad-Din showed that a protracted battle breaks down a system designed for lightning speed. The Japanese typhoon showed that nature does not read military regulations. The Mongols created the greatest land army in history. Their system worked against everything they understood. Against what they did not understand, she was powerless. If this story has touched you, subscribe.